What if your rent stopped going up tomorrow? For over 2 million New Yorkers, that's now a campaign promise. In fact, Zohran Mamdani's pledge to freeze the rent has triggered panic on Wall Street and a full-scale mobilization of landlords and real estate tycoons. More than 20 billionaires and super PACs poured over $22 million into campaigns to block him, with one landlord lobby alone pledging $2.5 million to support Andrew Cuomo. Is this a historic shift for tenants, or the beginning of a housing collapse? Why does Zohran Mamdani terrify landlords? And why should the real estate market care? You see, Zohran Mamdani wasn't expected to win. A 33-year-old activist turned state assemblyman raised in Uganda and Queens, he challenged the city's political elite and won. He captured headlines with stunts, viral videos, and a message that cut to the heart of New York's housing crisis. Rents are out of control, and the system is stacked against tenants. And when the mayoral race approached, he surged past Cuomo, turning a 30-point deficit into a lead in mere months. His campaign slogan, housing by and for New York, freezing rent, cracking down on greedy landlords, building truly affordable homes. Over 70% of New Yorkers rent, and more than half of them live in rent-stabilized apartments, which is why this campaign really spoke out to New Yorkers. Let's find out how his election as the mayor will move the NYC real estate markets. In theory, a rent freeze sounds simple. No increases. However, it's execution that's the complicated part. Mamdani's proposal targets rent-stabilized units, which are basically residential units where rent increases are regulated by law to prevent them from exceeding a specific government-set amount, which comes to roughly about 1 to 1.5 million apartments in NYC. Under his plan, the city's Rent Guidelines Board would set the annual increase at 0% for 4 years. This pause would apply only to those stabilized units, not market rate or luxury buildings. So while a tenant in a rent-stabilized building could see the same payment next year, someone in a new luxury unit would not be covered. Creation of supply and wealthy segments remain outside this freeze. Mamdani isn't really freezing all rent, but rather forcing the capital and regulatory system to catch up with affordability. So how can a mayor freeze rents, and what are his actual tools? Can the mayor just simply announce freezes start tomorrow? No, the mayor cannot directly set rents or override contracts. What he can actually do is shape the machinery. He appoints the 9-member RGB, sets the tone at City Hall, proposes budgets, influences state legislation. Mamdani's platform states, freeze the rent, build affordable housing, crack down on bad landlords. He pledges to appoint tenant-free programs to public housing preservation and build 200,000 new affordable rent-stabilized units. After his uprising, how did Wall Street and real estate investors respond? And does it matter? Within days of Mamdani's surge, the real estate industry braced for impact. New York-based REITs dropped 6% on talks of a rent freeze. Governing, a landlord-backed super PAC funded by the New York Apartment Association, announced a $2.5 million TV ad campaign backing Cuomo with a message, "Rent freeze equals housing collapse." In Business Insider's phrasing, this policy has undeniable populist appeal, but investors see red lights. So, yes, markets reacted, but this is also about sentiment. When landlords fear returns will dry up, they fight first and ask questions later. On one side, landlords and developers. They argue a freeze would choke investment, force deferred maintenance, shrink housing supply. The lobby declared a politically convenient disaster. On the other side, tenant advocates and the majority renters. They say rents push them out. One tenant told Business Insider, "I was paying $400 a month 30 years ago. Now I work 3 jobs and still can't stay." And economists? Mixed. Some warn freeze risks supply decline. Others say the cost of living crisis justifies bold action. What's clear, this isn't ideology versus economics. It's housing is shelter versus housing is asset. Given the success Zohran Mamdani found in New York, despite the uphill battle against a super PAC-funded anti-campaign, could this matter beyond New York? This isn't just about one city. Across the U.S., housing costs have soared. Cities like Los Angeles and Chicago are watching. If the freeze holds in NYC, it could become a national blueprint. Simultaneously, investors may shift capital. If NYC feels too risky, the Sunbelt cities, Dallas, Phoenix, Charlotte, will look more appealing. In other words, the place where you buy property is becoming a policy risk zone. Knowing which cities might flip to tenants' advantage or landlords' retreat gives you an edge. Is the rent freeze realistic? And what should we watch? Yes, legally it's possible, but it's a 4-year freeze viewed as 4 annual approval fights. The RGB will vote each summer. Lawsuits will happen. State laws could overturn parts of it. Key signals: who Mamdani appoints to the RGB, building permit filings in regulated housing, enforcement metrics for illegal hikes, and real estate capital flows. Even if the freeze weakens, the narrative has already shifted. And policy shifts matter, sometimes more than policy being perfect. If the freeze works, New York rewrites urban housing policy. If it fails, we might delay reform for a generation. Either way, it proves one truth. In modern cities, policy isn't separate from markets. What starts as a campaign slogan can ripple through skylines, balance sheets, and lives. This is the Meta Ledger. Subscribe for calm, data-driven insight where politics meets property.